Alright, in our last video we created padding and set all our margins to 0, and this is the design that we have so far. You can see that we have padding around our text in our certain areas: the header, nav, the main, and our footer. But right now everything is running 100% across, and that's not bad, but if we had content that read across that far, it would look it'd be hard to read, because you'd read all the way over here and then your eye has to come all the way over here, and it can just be a hard space to work with. So we're actually going to optimize our site for a tablet device that is held vertical, which is 768 pixels wide. I just know that because I do this a lot and have learned what these widths are. So to do that, we're going to come back to our source code. I'm still on the template file, and we're going to go to the source code and choose code view. Now once again, remember we have all these containers. The big container is called body, and then we had a container for a header, we have a container for the nav, we have a container for the main, and we have a container for the footer. Think of all of those as boxes that we can put content into. There's another type of container called a div, and so what we're going to want to do is put the header, nav, main, and footer into a div tag. And by doing so, we can control the size of all of these by controlling the size of just that one div tag. That's usually how it works, is if you have a container and if you don't set a size, it automatically takes a 100% width of the container it's in. Well, body will always be 100%. Okay, that always goes across the entire browser window. That's by default. And I don't even think you can change that, because it has to fill in the content with something. It can't just not have something. So what we're going to want to do is create another container called a div. So we can put these anywhere we want. A div tag that's just what they call it, a div, is like an invisible box, and we can put boxes anywhere we want. So we're going to start our div tag before the header and close it after the footer. That then puts all of these elements, that the header, nav, main, and the footer, inside our div. Alright, so the div is like an invisible box. I'm going to give this div an attribute called an ID. And then there's an equal sign with 2 double quotes. Inside that double quote, I'm going to choose the word wrapper. I can give it anything I want, but this particular box is called wrapper. Just like that. Once I got that, let's go ahead and save our changes. The nice thing about giving this a name is that now in my style sheet, I can create a style that will style just that div tag. So below my footer, although I could do this before my footer, actually let's do that. We're going to do it after the body tag, before the header. And the reason why I'm doing that is I'm keeping things in order. So the body was always first, then we have a div tag, then we have the header. So let's do the same thing in our style sheet. Here's the body, now we're going to have the div tag, and all we have to do is do # wrapper. We have the start scroll and the end scroll, and now I can control style properties, and the main one I'm going to do is called max width. And we're going to set that to 768 pixels. So as soon as I do that, come to live view, and you can see that now all of those containers that were inside the divs are now controlled to 768 pixels. Your Dreamweaver has a ruler bar showing pixels, so looks like it's doing its job right there at about 768. But the problem now is it's always tucked to the left and to the left side of the page. And so I've got a way of doing style properties to get it in the center. So let's do that next. I'm going to add another line of code. And this one's kind of weird. You just have to trust that this works. But you'd think there'd be something called the line, but there isn't. We're going to use something called margin, and we're going to do 0 and auto. And now to explain this, this is what we call shortcode. So instead of doing, we could also do margin hyphen top, margin hyphen bottom, margin hyphen left, margin hyphen right. But there's a way to write shortcode so that you can write it all on one line. And if you have the property of margin set, then we can give it two values with a space in between. The first number is top bottom. The second is left right. Now by choosing auto, what we're saying is whatever the left margin is, make the right margin the same. So in essence, you're going to have a margin which pushes it away to the left and pushes it to the right, and it's going to be exactly the same on each side. By having max width, we're saying that the div can be smaller than 768 pixels, but it can't be bigger than. If you didn't follow that, then you can just put this in and just trust me. And we'll learn a lot more about this in Web Design 1. So let's save this and go look at it. And there you go. Now everything is centered. In Dreamweaver, there's this bar at the right while you're in live view that lets you view different viewing browser widths. So if you had, let's say here at 1028, that's about an iPad held horizontally. That's what it would look like. It wouldn't be this tall, but that would be how wide it would look. Then when we go to 768, which is right there, that's what it would look like on a tablet, like an iPad, held vertically. And we can even go smaller than that. For instance, 480 would be an iPhone held sideways. 320 would be an iPhone held vertically. So you can see how this one website is going to work no matter we're on a desktop or on a tablet or on a smartphone. The site somewhat redesigns itself. But at 768 it only gets so wide. So that is just a very quick introduction to what we call responsive design. There's going to be some more that we do with that, but almost any more, if you're building websites, they really should be responsive, because the number of people using a mobile device such as a tablet or a smartphone to go to a website is growing, and pretty soon, if not already, the number of people looking at websites on a smartphone or a handheld device has now exceeded the number of people who view websites on a computer. Alright, so that's how we add a custom div tag to control and center, or control the width and center our content. In our next video, we're going to add an image logo.